Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. I can still remember the way the rain hit the pavement as I rushed out the door that Tuesday morning. I'd overslept, as usual, and now I was scrambling to make it to work. My umbrella turned inside out, the wind howling in my face. In the midst of it all, I bumped into him. Coffee spilled everywhere. Papers scattered. It felt like the universe had chosen that moment to remind me how clumsy I was. But then he laughed, softly, with warmth that somehow made everything feel lighter. "Don't worry about it," he said, steadying me as I fumbled with my things. "I think I owe you a coffee." The idea of getting coffee with him felt like the beginning of something I couldn't quite explain. It was a moment of chaos, but it was also oddly perfect. We went to a nearby cafe, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. We laughed, shared stories, and talked like we'd known each other for years. By the time we finished our drinks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in me. Something exciting, something new. We exchanged numbers that day, and from that moment on, my thoughts were filled with him. Jake. It was as if the universe had given me a sign, but I didn't fully understand it yet. The texts started coming in almost immediately. Simple messages at first. "How's your day going? What are you up to?" They were harmless enough, but each one made my heart race. I wasn't sure what was happening, but it felt right. We made plans to meet for dinner a few days later. It was a small Italian place in the city, intimate, warm. As soon as I walked in and saw him waiting by the window, I felt a flutter in my chest. He stood up to greet me, his smile wide and genuine, and I couldn't help but feel a wave of relief. I was nervous, but he made it easy. We talked about everything, from childhood memories to our favorite foods. The conversation never felt forced. It was the kind of date you read about in novels, the kind where you just know there's something special. By the end of the night, I was already thinking ahead, imagining what it would be like to have him in my life long term. This felt like something that could turn into something real. The next few weeks were a blur of perfect dates. Dinner, walks in the park, quiet nights at home. Every moment with Jake felt like magic. I found myself laughing more than I had in years, letting go of the tension I carried every day. But it wasn't just the fun times that kept me drawn to him. It was the way he made me feel. He listened when I talked, really listened, as if my words mattered. And when he spoke, his voice was calm, reassuring. He made me feel like I was the only person in the room. One night, after a particularly intimate dinner, we took a walk by the river. The air was cool, and the stars shone brightly above us. I was walking next to him, but it felt like we were the only two people in the world. "You know," Jake said, stopping and looking at me with a softness in his eyes, "I didn't expect to meet someone like you." His words lingered in the air. I didn't know what to say, but in that moment, I knew that I wanted him in my life. We stood there, our eyes locked, and for a brief moment, I thought time had stopped. I could hear my heart beating in my chest, could feel the rush of emotions overwhelming me. And then, Jake leaned in. The kiss was slow at first, tentative, like we were both trying to understand what this was. But then it deepened, and everything I had been feeling up until that point suddenly made sense. When we pulled away, I was breathless, my mind racing. Was this just a momentary spark, or was it something more? "I didn't expect that," I said softly, a little surprised by how much I had enjoyed it. Jake smiled, his eyes twinkling in the dim light. "Neither did I," he replied. "It was the beginning of something. I could feel it, and it made my heart soar." The days after that kiss felt like a dream. Everything with Jake seemed so effortless, so natural. We spent more time together, going to new places, exploring new hobbies. It felt like we were building something special, something real. One weekend, we decided to take a day trip to the mountains. The drive was filled with music and laughter, and when we reached the peak, the view took my breath away. We stood there, side by side, looking out over the vast expanse of nature. It felt like the perfect moment. "I can't imagine being anywhere else right now," I said, my voice soft with contentment. Jake turned to me, his eyes sincere. "Me neither." It felt right, this thing we were building together. I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he was the one I had been waiting for all along. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when Jake brought up the subject that had been lingering in my mind for weeks. We were sitting on the couch, watching a movie, when he turned to me, his expression serious. "Lily," he began, his voice low, "I've been thinking a lot about us. About our future." My heart skipped a beat. I had been wondering the same thing, but hearing him say it out loud felt different. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though inside, I was bursting with curiosity. "I want you to be a part of my life, forever," he said, his hand gently resting on mine. "I've never felt this way about anyone before. Will you marry me?" I gasped, my eyes welling up with tears. In that moment, everything around us disappeared. It was just the two of us. I knew this was it. This was the beginning of our forever. "Yes, yes, of course," I exclaimed, my voice cracking with emotion. Jake smiled, and in that smile, I saw our future unfold before me. I couldn't wait for the life we would build together. Planning a wedding is no small task, but Jake and I dove into it with excitement. We spent hours looking at venues, tasting cakes, and choosing colors. Every decision felt important, like a step closer to our dream day. Jake was perfect in every way. He was involved, supportive, and thoughtful. He made sure that every detail was just as I wanted, but he also had his own opinions, and I love that about him. We balanced each other perfectly. We chose a beautiful garden venue for the ceremony, flowers in full bloom, sunlight streaming through the trees. It was everything I had ever imagined. As we discussed the details, I couldn't help but feel that sense of giddiness, the feeling of being completely in love and knowing that I had found my person. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur of final preparations, but I didn't mind. The thought of marrying Jake kept me going. I couldn't wait to see him standing at the altar, waiting for me. Our families were excited. Everyone was buzzing with anticipation. It felt like everything was falling into place. But as the big day approached, a strange sense of unease started to settle in. It was fleeting, just a whisper in the back of my mind. I tried to push it away, but it lingered. Jake was always reassuring, always calm, and I kept telling myself that everything would be perfect. After all, he was the love of my life, and we were about to take the next big step together. The day before the wedding was filled with last-minute touches. I was at the venue, checking everything one last time, making sure everything was perfect. I was surrounded by my bridesmaids, laughter filling the air, but something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it. Jake had been distant the past few days, and though he'd been busy with last-minute preparations, there was an odd coldness in the way he spoke. I chalked it up to pre-wedding nerves, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. That night, I tried to reach him, but he didn't answer his phone. It wasn't like him to ignore me, and for the first time, I felt a pang of doubt. Was he having second thoughts? Was something going on that I didn't know about? But I pushed those thoughts aside. Tomorrow was the big day. Everything would be fine. I told myself that over and over again, trying to calm my racing heart. I woke up the morning of the wedding with excitement buzzing through my veins. Today was the day I had dreamed of. My dress was laid out on the bed, my shoes polished and ready. I felt like I was floating. But as the hours ticked by, the butterflies in my stomach began to turn into something darker. I tried to call Jake, but he still didn't answer. His absence felt more profound than I could explain. I wondered if I was being paranoid, but the feeling of unease only grew stronger. At the church, everything was in place. The guests were arriving. My family was buzzing with excitement, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at myself in my wedding dress. Was this really happening? Would he show up? I wanted to believe that it was all nerves, that he was just running late, that he was waiting for me at the altar. But a small voice in my head couldn't quiet itself. Something wasn't right. As I stood in front of the mirror, time seemed to slow. The minutes passed, and the dress felt heavier on my shoulders. I was trying to convince myself that it was all just nerves. Jake was a little late, that's all. Maybe there was traffic. Maybe he had gotten caught up with something. But deep down, a voice in my head kept whispering that something was wrong. My bridesmaids were buzzing around, making last-minute adjustments, but I couldn't focus. My phone was still silent. Every time it buzzed, I thought it might be him, but it wasn't. I stepped outside into the garden, hoping for some fresh air to calm my nerves. The sky was bright, the sun warming my face, but there was a chill in the air around me. I glanced at the clock. Soon it would be time to walk down the aisle, and Jake was still nowhere to be found. It was almost time for the ceremony, but Jake still hadn't shown up. My heart was pounding in my chest as I tried to focus on the task at hand. Walking down that aisle, saying my vows. But how could I do that when the man I was supposed to marry was missing? I reached for my phone again, my hands trembling. I tried calling him one more time. Still no answer. The minutes passed, each one heavier than the last. My bridesmaids were all smiles, but I could see the concern in their eyes, the way they kept glancing at the door, waiting for him to walk in. But he didn't come. I was starting to feel sick, the knot in my stomach tightening as the reality of the situation began to set in. What if something had happened to him? What if he didn't want to get married? I couldn't take it anymore. I ran into the back room, trying to keep myself calm. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. That's when I saw it. An unread message from Jake. It was short and to the point, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I can't do this. I'm sorry. My hands shook as I read the message again, hoping that I was misreading it, that this was some cruel joke. But it wasn't. It was real. I dialed his number once more, and this time, it rang. He picked up after a few seconds. "Jake?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Where are you? Why aren't you here?" "I can't marry you, Lily," he said, his voice cold and distant. "I'm sorry." I felt like the world was crashing down around me. "What do you mean? Why? I thought we were—" "I can't explain it," he interrupted. I can't do it. I need to go." And with that, he hung up. I stood there, stunned, the phone slipping from my hand as I collapsed onto a nearby chair. It felt like the room was spinning, my chest tightening with every breath. I couldn't believe it. I had spent months planning this day, imagining it, dreaming of it, and now it was all falling apart. The wedding was still going on outside. Guests were arriving, music playing softly, but I couldn't hear any of it. All I could hear was the cold finality of his words in my head. "I can't marry you." I had no answers, no explanation, just the overwhelming, suffocating weight of the rejection. My bridesmaids came rushing into the room, asking what had happened. I couldn't even find the words to tell them. The shock had left me speechless. All I could do was cry, tears streaming down my face as the realization hit me harder than I could have ever imagined. Jake was gone. It felt like days had passed before I managed to pull myself together enough to leave the room. I was supposed to be walking down the aisle to meet Jake, to start our life together. But now I was walking out of the church, my wedding dress trailing behind me like a heavy reminder of what I had lost. The guests were confused, some asking questions, others just staring in silence. I didn't have answers for them. I didn't know what had happened. I didn't know why Jake had left me without a word. I couldn't look at anyone. All I could think about was him. His face, his smile, the way he had made me feel so safe and loved. And now, he was gone, and I was left with nothing but questions. Why had he done this? Why had he abandoned me without explanation? The pain was unbearable, and the weight of it sank deeper with every step I took away from the church. For days, I couldn't stop replaying the events in my head. I kept asking myself the same questions over and over. What had happened? What had gone wrong? Jake and I had been so happy, or so I thought. How could he just disappear like that, without any warning? I tried calling him again, texting him, but there was no response. It was like he had vanished off the face of the earth. I was left with nothing but an empty phone screen and a heart full of unanswered questions. Everyone around me tried to comfort me, but their words felt hollow. "He'll come around," they said. "Maybe he's just scared." But I knew in my gut that something deeper was at play. Jake wasn't the type of man to just run away like this. He had to have known how much this would hurt me. So why? The not knowing ate away at me, gnawing at my peace of mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a simple case of cold feet. There had to be more. Days turned into weeks, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized that there had to be something I had missed. Something had changed with Jake. Something subtle, something that in hindsight seemed so obvious. I went back through our texts, our calls, the moments we'd shared leading up to the wedding. What had been different? What could I have overlooked? That's when I saw it. A message from Jake, a few days before the wedding, buried among the endless planning updates. It was short, vague, and to the point. "I think we need to talk." I had dismissed it at the time, thinking he was just feeling overwhelmed by the pressure of the wedding. But now, I saw it for what it was, an early warning. A cry for help that I hadn't paid attention to. Why hadn't I taken it seriously? Why hadn't I pushed him to talk more? The more I searched for answers, the more I realized how little I actually knew about Jake. Sure, we'd been close, but had I truly understood him? I started asking questions, reaching out to friends and family who knew Jake. People who had been in his life longer than I had. Surely, they would have some insight. But every conversation seemed to lead to a dead end. No one had seen this coming. Everyone described him as the same man I had known. Kind, attentive, loving. But no one had mentioned anything about potential issues. No warning signs, nothing. It was as though Jake had built a life around me. A life that I thought was real, but in truth, it had been an illusion. He had kept things hidden from me. One of his closest friends, Max, seemed the most uneasy when I pressed him for answers. After some hesitation, he reluctantly admitted that Jake had been distant in the weeks leading up to the wedding. But even then, Max wasn't sure what had been bothering him. "Jake's always been a bit closed off," Max had said. "He doesn't like to talk about his feelings, especially when things get heavy." That didn't make sense to me. We were about to get married. How could he not talk to me about what was going on in his mind? As I sat alone in my apartment, sorting through old photos of Jake and me, the weight of everything hit me harder than I could have anticipated. The smiles, the laughter, the moments we'd shared, they all felt so distant now. I had believed in us, in him. In the future we were supposed to build together. But now, it all seemed like a lie. The memory of our first date kept replaying in my mind. The way he had laughed when I spilled coffee on him, how he had so easily made me feel at ease. I remembered our first kiss, the way he had held me like I was the most important thing in the world. He had made me feel special, like I was his person. And yet, here I was, picking up the pieces of a shattered dream. I held on to those memories, though. They were all I had left of the man I had thought I would marry, the man I had imagined spending my life with. But now, those memories felt like they belonged to someone else, a past that no longer existed. I had searched for answers everywhere. I had asked all the right questions, talked to the people who knew Jake best, but I still didn't know the truth. What had made him walk away? What had happened in his mind to make him leave me at the altar, with no explanation, no apology? I spent hours trying to make sense of it, going through every text, every conversation, looking for clues that I had missed. But there was nothing, no sign, no warning. Just a man who had made a decision to disappear, and in doing so, had left me with a lifetime of questions. But in the end, I realized that maybe I would never get the answers I needed. Maybe the truth was something Jake would take with him, something he would never share. And as much as that hurt, I had to accept it. Sometimes, the truth isn't meant to be uncovered. Sometimes, we're left with nothing but the memory of what we thought was real, and the painful lesson that not everything is what it seems. Weeks passed, and I tried to move forward. I buried myself in work, spent time with friends, and did everything I could to distract myself from the aching hole Jake had left in my life. But no matter what I did, there was always this lingering emptiness, a nagging question that haunted me. Why had he left? It was a random Thursday when I saw him again. I was walking into a coffee shop, lost in thought, when I looked up and saw him standing by the counter, his back turned to me. My heart dropped into my stomach. It felt like I couldn't breathe. "Jake." I stood frozen for a moment, unsure whether to approach him or walk away. My hands trembled, and for a moment, I thought I might faint. But before I could make up my mind, he turned, his eyes meeting mine. There was no recognition in his gaze, just cold, empty indifference. "Lily," he said, his voice flat, almost distant. "Jake," I whispered, the words barely escaping my lips. He didn't seem surprised to see me, but I could tell he was uncomfortable. "I didn't expect you to be here," he said. His tone was detached, almost as if we were strangers. It was then that I realized I didn't know him at all anymore. I couldn't hold back anymore. The flood of emotions I had buried deep inside me for weeks poured out in that moment. The hurt, the confusion, the anger. It all came rushing to the surface. Why, Jake? Why did you do this to me? I demanded, my voice shaking. He took a step back, clearly startled by the intensity of my words. Lily, No. I interrupted, my voice rising. You ghosted me. You left me alone, on the day of our wedding, and you never even gave me an explanation. Do you know how much that hurt? Jake's face softened, but he didn't say anything. For a moment, it felt like he was trying to find the right words, but nothing came out. I couldn't go through with it, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. My chest tightened as the realization set in. So, all this time, you've been lying to me? I wasn't lying to you, Lily. I was just scared. Scared? I repeated, the word feeling foreign coming from him. You were scared? Jake. You left me at the altar without a second thought. I know, he said quietly. I know it was wrong. I'm sorry. As Jake stood there, trying to explain himself, I couldn't help but feel this overwhelming sense of betrayal. All the promises, all the moments we had shared. It felt like they were nothing more than an illusion. A lie he had crafted to make me believe in a future that never existed. I don't understand, I said, my voice cracking. How could you say you loved me, and then just walk away like that? Jake sighed heavily. Because I thought I loved you. But the truth is, I wasn't ready for that kind of commitment. I never was. I told myself I was, but deep down I knew I wasn't. The words stung, but they made sense. He had never been ready to settle down. He had never been the man I thought he was. You should have told me, I whispered, the hurt evident in my voice. Instead of just disappearing. I should have, he agreed, his eyes filled with regret. But I was too afraid. Afraid of disappointing you. Afraid of what the future might hold. You disappointed me more by leaving me without an explanation, I replied, tears welling in my eyes. After that conversation with Jake, I found myself struggling to reconcile the man I had loved with the man who stood before me now. The one who had hurt me in the worst possible way, who had abandoned me when I needed him the most. The bitterness of it all gnawed at me. It wasn't just the fact that he had left me. It was that he had made me believe in something that wasn't real. He had shown me a version of our life that had never existed, and in doing so, he had taken something precious from me. I spent days in a haze, replaying our conversation, trying to make sense of it all. I had loved him, deeply, wholeheartedly, and yet he had never truly been mine. He had never been all in. The worst part was, I knew I couldn't go back. The damage was done. He had taken away the trust one had placed in him, and I couldn't rebuild that. And so, I faced the painful truth. Our love had never been as real as I thought it was. I spent weeks grappling with my emotions, trying to come to terms with everything. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I felt like I might break under the weight of the heartbreak. But eventually, I started to heal. Slowly, bit by bit, I found my way out of the dark place Jake had left me in. I began to focus on myself, on my own happiness, my own growth. I spent more time with friends who supported me, with family who loved me unconditionally. I went to therapy to help me process everything, and gradually, I started to feel like myself again. The ache of losing Jake didn't disappear overnight, but I learned how to live with it. I learned how to let go of the person I had thought he was, and I accepted that sometimes love isn't enough to make a relationship work. I didn't need Jake to complete me anymore. I was enough on my own. Months had passed since I saw Jake, and I had done my best to move on, but life had a funny way of throwing curveballs. One rainy afternoon, I ran into someone unexpected, Max, Jake's close friend. Max had always been a bit of a mystery to me. He was quiet, reserved, and often seemed to know more than he let on. We exchanged pleasantries, but there was a tension in the air that I couldn't ignore. Lily, I've been meaning to talk to you, he said after a long silence. About Jake. The mention of Jake made my stomach twist, but I managed to nod. What about him? Max looked around, as if to make sure no one was listening. I don't know if you know this, but Jake was dealing with something personal. For a long time before the wedding, I felt my heart skip a beat. What do you mean? Max hesitated, his eyes darting away. He was in debt. Badly. And not just that. There were other things he didn't want anyone to know. I took a step back. Why didn't he tell me? Why didn't he trust me? I think he thought he could fix it on his own, without involving you. But in the end, it just became too much. Max's revelation about Jake was like a punch to the gut. The man I had loved, the man I had thought I knew, had been hiding so much from me. How could I have been so blind? As Max continued to talk, he explained that Jake had accumulated massive debts, but it wasn't just financial struggles that had been weighing on him. There had been deeper emotional battles, issues from his past that Jake had never wanted to confront. He didn't know how to ask for help, Max said quietly. He didn't want to admit that he couldn't handle it all on his own. I sat there, stunned. My mind raced with questions. Had Jake's fear of letting me in been the reason he had left? Had he been trying to protect me from his problems? Or had he just been too selfish to think about anyone but himself? The more Max spoke, the more I realized how little I had truly known about Jake. I don't know what he expected, Max added, but I think he thought running away would solve everything. It didn't. Max's words lingered in my mind for days. I couldn't stop thinking about what he had told me, about Jake's struggles, his isolation, his decision to walk away instead of seeking help. It didn't make everything okay, but it helped me understand him in a way. But understanding didn't erase the pain. It didn't change what had happened or make the hurt go away. I tried to reach out to Jake again, hoping for some kind of closure, something to help me move on. But every time I thought about calling him, I felt a surge of doubt. Was I doing this for the right reasons? Or was I just trying to fill the empty space he had left in my life? One evening, I sat down and wrote him a letter. Not a plea for him to come back or an angry outburst, but a letter for me. A letter to release all the emotions I had been holding on to, everything I had never said. I don't know why you left, Jake, I wrote, but I've come to realize that I can't keep waiting for answers that may never come. I need to move forward, even if it means letting you go. The moment I sealed that letter, I felt a weight lift from my chest. I wasn't doing it for him. I was doing it for me. As the weeks passed, I began to focus more on myself. I didn't want to be defined by my past or by Jake's abandonment. Slowly, I started to rebuild my life, piece by piece. I started volunteering at a local shelter, something I had always wanted to do but never found the time for. It gave me a sense of purpose, a way to channel my energy into something positive. One evening, while helping at a fundraiser for the shelter, I met someone new. His name was Sam, and he was kind, funny, and easy to talk to. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark, something I hadn't felt in a while. We spent the evening talking, laughing, and sharing stories. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people getting to know each other. And while I wasn't ready to jump into anything serious, it felt nice to feel seen again. For the first time since Jake, I allowed myself to think that maybe there was more to life than heartache. Maybe I could love again, in time. Even though I had met Sam, I still carried the weight of my past with me. The fear of getting hurt again, of trusting someone only to have them walk away, was something I couldn't shake. As Sam and I spent more time together, I found myself holding back. I didn't want to repeat the same mistakes I had made with Jake. I didn't want to give someone my heart only to have it ripped apart again. It wasn't that I didn't like Sam, because I did, but there was this part of me that was terrified of falling too fast, of becoming vulnerable again. I didn't know how to let go of the fear, how to trust again. But I also knew that if I didn't take that leap, I would never move forward. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of my past. And so, as hard as it was, I decided to take a chance. I let Sam in, one step at a time. I let him see the parts of me that I had hidden away, the parts that still carried the scars of my past. As Sam and I grew closer, something shifted within me. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was a connection, a spark of something real, something genuine that felt like it could become more. We spent more time together, enjoying each other's company without rushing into anything. We talked about everything, our pasts, our dreams, our fears. There was an ease between us that I hadn't felt in a long time. But every so often, a shadow would cross my mind. Was I just trying to fill the void left by Jake? Was this really something special, or was I just afraid of being alone? Sam never pushed me. He was patient, kind, and understanding. He respected my boundaries and gave me space when I needed it. But still, I found myself holding back, afraid to give too much of myself too soon. It was a slow burn, but it was a burn that felt more like healing than anything else. I didn't know where it would lead, but I was willing to see. One evening, as we were walking through the park, Sam turned to me with a serious expression on his face. It caught me off guard. His tone was different, more vulnerable than I had ever heard it. "Lily," he said, his voice soft but steady. "I really like you. More than I thought I would." My heart raced as I looked at him. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment where I had to decide if I was ready to take that leap. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "Sam, I like you too." But I hesitated, the fear creeping back into my chest. "I'm just not sure if I'm ready for something serious yet." He smiled gently, his eyes full of understanding. "I get it. I'm not rushing you, Lily, but I just want you to know that I'm here. Whenever you're ready." His words were exactly what I needed to hear. No pressure, just the freedom to take my time and figure out what I wanted. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. As much as I wanted to move forward with Sam, my past still lingered in the corners of my mind. Jake's ghost haunted me, his promises, his abandonment, the shattered dreams. One night, I found myself lying awake, unable to sleep, consumed by the memories of what could have been. I thought about everything that had gone wrong with Jake. The way he had walked out of my life without warning. The way he had broken my heart without a second thought. But then, I thought about Sam, and I realized that I wasn't the same person I was when Jake had left. I had grown. I had learned from my mistakes, from the pain. And while I couldn't forget the past, I didn't have to let it control me. I had to face the fact that no matter how much I wished things had been different with Jake, I couldn't keep holding on to what was gone. I had to let go. It was hard, but I knew it was the only way to move forward. The days went by, and Sam and I continued to grow closer. Our time together felt effortless, but there was always this lingering question in the back of my mind. Was I ready to love again? One evening, as we sat on the balcony, watching the sunset, Sam turned to me. His eyes were soft, sincere, and full of emotion. "I'm glad I met you, Lily," he said quietly. "You've brought something into my life that I didn't know I needed." I felt a warmth spread through me at his words, but I couldn't help but feel nervous. "I feel the same way," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. And then, as if the world slowed down for a moment, Sam reached out and cupped my face in his hands. His touch was gentle, reassuring. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of everything that had led to this moment. The heartbreak, the healing, the fear. And then he kissed me. It was soft at first, hesitant, but as our lips met, a flood of emotions washed over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. After the kiss, things changed. We became even closer, and the more time I spent with Sam, the more I realized how much I was falling for him. But with that realization came fear. The fear that I would once again be left heartbroken. I had given Sam a part of myself, and now I feared that I was too invested, too vulnerable. What if he left me the way Jake had? What if I was opening myself up to more pain? One evening, as we were sitting on the couch, Sam noticed that something was off. "Lily, what's going on? You seem distant." I couldn't hide it any longer. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice shaky. "I'm scared of getting hurt again. I don't know if I can handle that kind of heartbreak again." Sam took my hand in his grip firm and steady. "I'm not Jake, Lily, and I'm not going anywhere. I care about you, and I'm here for you. I'll never hurt you the way he did." His words were exactly what I needed to hear. Slowly, I started to believe him, but the fear still lingered, deep down, reminding me of the scars I still carried. As the days passed, Sam and I grew closer. We spent almost every day together, doing simple things, walking in the park, cooking dinner together, or just talking about life. But there were still moments when I felt that familiar sense of hesitation. One evening, we were sitting on the couch, the TV playing softly in the background, but neither of us really paying attention. Sam turned to me, his expression serious. "I think it's time we talk about something important," he said, his voice low. I felt my heart skip a beat. "What's that?" He hesitated for a moment before continuing. "About Jake." The mention of his name sent a chill through me. "Sam, we don't need to talk about him. Not now, not ever." But Sam's eyes were soft, filled with understanding. "I just want to make sure you're not still holding on to him, that you're not comparing me to him." I stared at him for a moment, the weight of his words settling into my chest. It wasn't that I was comparing them, but there was a part of me that was still haunted by my past. The ghosts of Jake's betrayal lingered in my heart, and I couldn't shake them, no matter how hard I tried. "I'm not comparing you to him, Sam," I said softly, "but I can't just erase the past. It's not that simple." Sam nodded slowly, his expression gentle. "I know. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. I care about you, Lily." Over the following weeks, Sam and I continued to grow closer. Every day, I felt more and more comfortable with him. But the trust we were building didn't come overnight. There were still moments of doubt, still days when I felt the weight of my past creeping up on me. One afternoon, Sam took me to a quiet cafe we both loved. As we sat across from each other, sipping our drinks, he asked me a question that I had been dreading. "What happened with Jake, Lily?" I looked down at my cup, trying to find the right words. It wasn't easy to talk about, but I knew that if we were going to move forward, I needed to be honest. "I thought I had everything figured out," I said softly. "We had plans, dreams, a future." But then he disappeared, and I never got any closure. He just walked away, and I never understood why. Sam listened carefully, his gaze never leaving mine. "I can't pretend to understand everything that happened between you two, but I want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." It was then that I realized Sam wasn't asking me to forget the past. He wasn't asking me to move on from my pain immediately. He was simply asking me to trust him, to allow him to be a part of my future. As time passed, the emotional walls I had built around myself started to crumble. I allowed myself to lean into the relationship with Sam, to trust him in ways I hadn't trusted anyone in years. One evening, as we walked along the beach, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. The waves crashed against the shore, and the cool breeze tugged at my hair, but I was content. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. "You know, I've always loved the ocean," I said, my voice soft. "It's so peaceful, so constant." Sam smiled, his hand brushing against mine. "I can see why. It's beautiful." We walked in silence for a while, just enjoying each other's company. But then, Sam spoke up again. "I want you to know something, Lily. You don't have to have all the answers right now. You don't have to have everything figured out. We'll take it one step at a time." I looked at him, the sincerity in his eyes making my heart swell. "I know," I said quietly, "and I'm starting to believe that it's okay to not have everything figured out. I'm starting to believe that maybe I can heal." As Sam and I continued to grow closer, I found myself more and more invested in him. I cared for him deeply, but with that love came the fear of losing him. I had already been hurt once, and the idea of going through that pain again terrified me. One evening, after a quiet dinner at his place, Sam and I sat together on the couch, talking about everything and nothing at all. But in the back of my mind, that nagging fear lingered. What if he decided he didn't want to be with me anymore? What if he left, just like Jake had? I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't notice Sam's hand gently squeezing mine. "Lily," he said softly, "I can tell something's bothering you. What's going on?" I hesitated, unsure whether I was ready to open up about my fears. But as I looked into his eyes, I realized that he wasn't going to judge me. He was here for me. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm scared of losing you. I'm scared that I'm not enough, that you'll walk away the way Jake did." Sam's expression softened, and he pulled me into a gentle embrace. "You don't have to be afraid, Lily. I'm not going anywhere. I'm here, and I'm not going to leave you. I care about you more than you know." After that conversation, something shifted between Sam and me. The trust we had been building solidified, and I felt more certain than ever that I was on the right path. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of doubt, still days when I questioned whether I was ready for this. But with Sam by my side, I began to believe that maybe I was. The journey wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had found something worth fighting for. As Sam and I continued to grow closer, I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt that clung to me like a second skin. I had never fully let go of Jake, not in the way I needed to. My heart still carried remnants of him, and I felt as though I was betraying Sam by not being completely open with him about my lingering feelings. One evening, as we sat together in my apartment, Sam noticed that something was off. He had become attuned to my moods, and I couldn't hide my unease. "Lily, what's wrong?" he asked gently, his hand resting on mine. I looked down at our intertwined fingers, feeling the weight of everything. "I feel guilty," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Guilty because I still think about Jake sometimes. I don't want to hurt you, but I don't know how to fully let go of him." Sam's expression softened, and he squeezed my hand. "Lily, I understand. You don't have to forget your past to move forward, but you need to be honest with yourself about where you stand. If you're ready for something with me, we can take it slow, but you need to give yourself permission to heal." His words were exactly what I needed to hear. I didn't have to erase my past. I just needed to find a way to let go of the guilt that held me back. Even as Sam and I grew closer, I struggled with something that I couldn't shake, the feeling of being unworthy. My past had scarred me, and I often found myself questioning if I truly deserved happiness. I had been abandoned, betrayed, and broken, and I didn't know if I could ever be the person Sam deserved. One night, as we sat on the couch, I was lost in thought. I hadn't been able to shake the feeling of inadequacy that had been following me for weeks. "You're quiet tonight," Sam observed, his voice soft. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything inside me. "I don't know if I deserve this," I confessed, my voice trembling. "I don't know if I'm worthy of someone like you." Sam's eyes softened, and he gently cupped my face in his hands. "Lily, you're more than enough. I care about you because of who you are, not because of your past. You've been through a lot, but that doesn't define you. You're worthy of love, of happiness." His words hit me like a wave, washing away the doubts that had clouded my mind. Maybe, just maybe, I was worthy of this. It was on a quiet Sunday afternoon, as we sat in a park surrounded by blooming flowers, that I realized something profound. Sam wasn't asking me to be perfect. He wasn't expecting me to have it all together, and that realization hit me harder than anything else. "I've been trying so hard to be something I'm not," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Trying to hide my fears, my insecurities. I thought I had to be perfect for you, but I've been so scared of being vulnerable." Sam turned to me, his expression soft and full of understanding. "Lily, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have it all figured out. I love you for exactly who you are, with all your flaws and imperfections." Those words, simple and yet so powerful, unlocked something within me. It was the permission I needed to stop trying to be someone I wasn't, and to just be myself. To allow myself to be vulnerable, to embrace the person I was becoming, and to trust that Sam would still love me. After that conversation with Sam, something shifted inside me. I no longer felt the constant weight of my past, and I realized that I was ready to let go of the emotional baggage that had held me back for so long. One evening, as we walked hand in hand along a quiet street, the glow of the streetlights casting a warm hue around us, I looked at Sam and felt something shift inside me. "Sam," I said softly, stopping in my tracks. "I think I'm ready. Ready to move forward. Ready to love again." He stopped beside me, his eyes filled with warmth and tenderness. "I'm glad to hear that, Lily. I've been waiting for you to be ready, but I never wanted to rush you. I'm just happy that you're here with me now." In that moment, I realized that it wasn't about forgetting my past. It was about embracing the future and the love I was finding with Sam. Even though I had made the decision to move forward with Sam, there were still moments when the fear crept back in. What if I was making a mistake? What if I wasn't ready for this kind of commitment? One night, as we were lying in bed together, I couldn't shake the doubts that lingered in my mind. Sam, I whispered, my voice barely audible. What if I'm not ready for this? What if I'm making a mistake? Sam turned to face me, his eyes full of patience and understanding. Lily, I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm not asking you to have everything figured out. All I'm asking is that you take it one day at a time with me. We'll figure it out together. I looked at him, feeling the warmth of his words settle into my heart. Maybe I didn't have all the answers, but maybe, just maybe, I didn't need them. As time went on, I began to see how much Sam truly cared for me. His patience never wavered, and despite my emotional baggage, he remained steady, supportive, and always ready to listen. But I was still afraid. Fear crept into my mind at the most unexpected times. I worried that the walls I had built around myself would never come down completely. One evening, while we were out for a walk, I found myself hesitating to speak. There was something I needed to say, but I wasn't sure how. You seem quiet, Sam said, looking at me with concern. I took a deep breath, knowing that this was the moment. I'm scared, I admitted, the words feeling heavy as they left my mouth. Scared that I'm going to ruin everything. Scared that I'll mess up, or that you'll leave me like Jake did. Sam stopped walking, pulling me gently into his arms. Lily, I'm not Jake, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for you, through everything. His words settled over me like a warm blanket, comforting me in a way I hadn't felt in so long. I realized then that I had to trust him, and more importantly, I had to trust myself. There came a day, a pivotal moment, when Sam and I had a conversation that changed everything. We were sitting at our favorite cafe, the one where we had talked for hours about our pasts, our dreams, and everything in between. But today was different. Today, we were talking about the future. I've been thinking a lot about us, Sam began, his eyes serious. About what we want, where we're headed. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Was he about to tell me he didn't want this anymore? Was he going to walk away, like Jake had? I'm not going anywhere, he continued, as if reading my mind. But I need you to be honest with me, Lily. Are you ready for this? Are you ready for a future with me? His question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I searched his eyes, looking for any hint of doubt, any sign that this wasn't real. But all I saw was sincerity, and for the first time in a long while, I believed in it. Yes, I said, my voice steady. I'm ready. I want this with you. In that moment, I realized that I had come a long way. I wasn't the same person I had been when I first met Sam. I had grown, I had healed, and I was ready to move forward, into the future we could build together. The weeks that followed were filled with small, quiet moments that reaffirmed everything Sam and I had built. We spent time together, learning more about each other, supporting one another, and growing in ways I never thought possible. But one day, something happened that tested everything we had. I received an unexpected message. Jake was back. I stared at the message on my phone, the words blurring as my heart began to race. Lily, I made a mistake. I want to talk. Can we meet? I felt a wave of panic wash over me. Jake had walked away, abandoned me without explanation, and now he wanted to come back into my life? I couldn't process it, couldn't fathom what he wanted. Sam, I whispered, showing him the message. Jake wants to talk. He looked at the screen for a long moment, his jaw tightening. What do you want to do? I didn't have an answer. I didn't know if I was ready to face him again, to open that door. But I knew that Sam was right next to me, and that made all the difference. I don't know, I admitted, feeling lost, but I need to figure this out. The next few days were a blur of emotions. I thought about Jake constantly, what he had done, the pain he had caused, and the fact that he wanted to reappear in my life now. But more than anything, I thought about Sam. I had to make a choice. Jake, who had hurt me and left me without a word, or Sam, who had shown me what real love, trust, and patience looked like? The answer was clear. I didn't need to meet with Jake. I didn't need closure from someone who had already walked away from me. What I needed was to stand firmly in the life I had built with Sam, to embrace the future we had started together. One evening, after a long day of reflection, I looked at Sam and made my decision. I don't need to see him, I said, my voice firm. Jake isn't part of my life anymore. I have you, and that's all I need. Sam's eyes softened, and he pulled me close. I'm so proud of you, Lily. In that moment, I realized just how far I had come. I had faced my past, had confronted my fears, and had chosen love. Not just the love Sam had to offer, but my own love for myself and for the life I was now creating. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. With each passing day, I felt the weight of my past grow lighter. I was no longer bound by the fear of abandonment, the pain of betrayal. I was free, and I was ready to move forward. Sam and I continued to build our life together, stronger than ever. We faced challenges, yes, but we faced them together. And as I stood beside him, watching the sunset one evening, I knew that this was the beginning of something beautiful. I'm so glad I found you, I said softly, my voice full of emotion. Sam smiled, his arm around me. Me too, Lily. Me too. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. I was where I was supposed to be, right here, in this moment, with Sam by my side.